Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I'm your host, Brian Funk. This is the show about all things making music. And today, I have a very interesting music making story for you with our guest, Ethan Miska. So Ethan put together a project called Single Sonic 7, which involves collaborations with musicians all over the world on all 7 continents. And it's a really pretty cool undertaking. Lots of, I'm sure, legwork and finding the musicians and the artists and putting together all the music. I'm very excited to hear the story. I love this kind of thing of people coming together. It was really one of my hopes from the pandemic, really, that we'd all realize how connected we all are and how what happens to somebody on one side of the earth really does matter to us on another side of the earth. And I think this project kind of captures that spirit a little bit. So, Ethan, welcome to the show. Great to have you.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, I appreciate the introduction. And as a show listener, it's pretty meta being here and pretty cool.
That's cool. I'm glad to have you, and thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah, this project is really cool, man. When you told me about it, I was like, oh, that sounds like a lot of fun. I love the idea of collaboration, of course, and working with other people. But maybe you can tell us just a little bit how this all came together.
Sure. Where to start? So Single Sonic 7, it's a Corona baby, definitely. So it's something that I've been working on for the past 2+ years. At the time when it came about, I was living in Berlin, Germany. And it was, I had been living in Berlin for a few years at that point and been playing some electronic gigs and releasing some EPs as a solo artist there, Blunderbuss. And then, the story, Corona hit, music industry, and the whole world gets turned on its head. And so no shows. And this was about 6 months into the pandemic in Germany. And at this point, it was very clear that this whole COVID thing, it wasn't a flash in the pan. And that basically the world post-COVID, if there is one, would be pretty different. And so I was thinking, okay, I would love to do something collaborative. In-person collaboration isn't really happening that much right now, but we have the tools now that isn't really that much of a barrier anyways. And I guess I'm always kind of attracted to like the biggest possible version of an idea. Like, okay, I want to do something collaborative. Well, what's the most collaborative thing that I could think of? And obviously it's collaborating with someone on all 7 continents. So yeah, had that idea amidst just the start of a very long lockdown in Berlin. It ended up being like 7 or 8 months. And yeah, just applied for a bunch of grants, got a bunch of no's, and then ended up getting a yes from one grant from the city of Berlin. So shout out to my homies at the Berlin Senate Administration for Culture in Europe. And that's how Single Sonic 7 got started.
Yeah, thank God we had the internet and all the ways of communicating and interacting with each other that we did when that all happened. And it's a lot of good, if I'm trying to be optimistic here, like a lot of good did come out of that, and that did open up new communities and bring people together. And it seems like this is something, you took that route, obviously, to make the most of what we were dealt here and make something positive out of it.
Yeah, that was the idea. And I'm sure there are things that I would do differently if there's a second round, but it wasn't just for me. It was kind of a blessing in disguise. I had been enjoying doing the solo thing, But there were also a lot of aspects about being just a solo musician, kind of cutting my teeth on the cold gray streets of Berlin in these dirty little smoke-filled clubs and dragging a big suitcase full of gear around town on public transportation. That there are certain things about that I don't miss. And so not to mention the fact that I think especially in the Corona era, there was more funding for musicians and artists to do their thing, at least in Berlin. So I'm not sure even if like I would have had the opportunity to put together a project like this if Corona hadn't happened. So not saying it's all good, but yeah, there's a silver lining to that.
Right. What were your electronic sets like? Your solo, I'm assuming electronic anyway, solo sets. I mean, there must have been something electronic anyway.
Yeah, there was. Yeah, when the electricity
Electric
worked.
bass.
Yeah, electric bass. It was pretty minimal, but surprising how much of a pain in the ass it was to set up, considering that I only was playing two things. I actually got started with my electronic set playing at open mics, which there are reasons why you don't see a lot of electronic artists at open mics. I'm not sure if that's anything that you've experienced yourself.
Oh, it has.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm assuming you're talking about the setup.
Yes.
Yeah.
The setup and the rapid teardown where you're just grabbing a bunch of cables and gear and shoving it into a box and running awkwardly off stage. Yeah, so my electronic setup basically was, or is just bass guitar. I love to slap the bass, and Ableton Push, and which I would smash my hand against, my head against, do all sorts of kooky, gimmicky stuff. And this would be, well, for the first little while I was playing open mics to get my feet wet with gigging as an electronic musician. It was very much like there were a lot of kinks. And the first time that I tried playing a show, actually, I got there super early, thought I'd be super well prepared, brought a bunch of cables I didn't think I would need, talked to the host, let him know, hey, sorry to be annoying, but I have this setup. I was wondering if you would be able to accommodate me and maybe I could play first just so that we can get all my setup taken care of. And so spent maybe a half hour setting up, and then did not get any sound coming out. We were messing around for like 20 minutes with the sound person, and just did not get sound coming out of the house speakers. And so I ended up just packing everything up and going home.
Oh, no.
And came back a week later, same place. We figured it out, but then, oh God, about 30 seconds into the one song that I played, it became clear that there was some kind of cable issue. The audio kept getting really loud, and then it got really quiet, and then really loud again, and I was sweating bullets. And then technical issues aside, it was just a very amateur set because I had my bass guitar, had Ableton Push, and then I had my laptop on the little table next to Ableton Push, and there was a certain parameter that for some reason I just felt so determined that I needed to play this parameter live, but it wasn't something that I was able to control from my external gear. I wasn't able to control it from Push, so I was like, all right, well, I'll just use the trackpad on my computer, which in retrospect is just such a kind of amateur fail because it just looks like you're kind of rocking back and forth in front of your computer while there's a crowd of people just kind of sipping on beer and watching with amusement at me trying to do my electronic set. But yeah, that was that was the introduction to a blunderbuss.
Yeah, I know that feeling. It's hard to make it look like you're not doing email, on stage. And, finding a way to do it.
Yeah.
It really does take time, with doing it's the same as if you were in a band or if you were playing a solo acoustic. You need the time, you need to go through the kind of fire a little bit in the beginning and
Yeah.
learn what not
Definitely.
to do. And I've had the same thing. I've had poorly mapped things right next to like the stop button. Oops, I missed that. I hit the wrong button, and
Oh
then everything
no.
just
Yeah.
stops. So hopefully you learn from those mistakes, but it's
Yeah.
part
Yeah.
of it.
I
Yeah.
would hope. Yeah. I was did a few live streams just when anyone with a guitar or any kind of music project was doing a live stream in the first couple months of the pandemic, and I hopped on that bandwagon, and I was trying to do a lot that I didn't have a lot of experience with, and so did this thing where it was also collaborative, which was really fun, where we were coordinating. It was me and a group of handful of other musicians for each of the live streams, where we would make a song in advance, and then the collaborators would record their parts, like a video of them performing their part of the song, and then I would perform my part of the song live, and I had it set up on my computer so that when I started the song in my DAW in Ableton, it would also trigger video playback that the collaborator had sent me. So it wasn't meant to fool people, but the impression was that like you're seeing our performances simultaneously. And then something happened, of course, that I could not predict, which was that at some point midway through a song, when I was playing on my MIDI controller, the video playback of the collaborators' parts was getting triggered by buttons on push that were not supposed to trigger it. So on the one side of the screen, there was me playing my part, and then on the other side of the screen, it was this other video just glitching out. But there's all sorts of stuff, and I really do agree with you that there's just there's just so much trial by fire that it's just it's part of the process.
Right. Well, hey, you made it through it, right? It didn't kill you. Now it's a funny story. I'm sure it was a little scary in the moment, but they just most things become funny stories in the end. Well, I see the seeds then of the collaborative spirit going on, something you were really looking for with that.
Yeah. I've always had a thing for collaboration, just musical or not. Single Sonic 7 definitely came out of that.
Well, it's kind of funny if you think about it, that collaboration in a weird way is almost like new again, because we've had all this, I don't know what it's been like 10, 15 years of where people are really getting into this like solo thing, where you can do it all by yourself. You can have these DAW-less setups. And then you kind of realize like, it's kind of cool to have people too, because a lot of the things we're trying to do in like our computers or with our DAWs is to like, we want groove, we want swing, we want probability, we want chance, and we want all of these variations that humans would do. And then sometimes you're just like, why don't I just like get a human?
I never thought of it that way, that so much of what we do now or as music producers, just that we would do in a DAW is basically trying to mimic what an actual person would do
by mistake.
But then after a certain point, it's like, well, like why did I stop working with actual people? It's funny. With this project, one theme that kept reappearing through the creative process was just how cool it is to make music with people from very different genres and very different backgrounds and with different tastes and different ideas. And I think that's kind of built into every collaboration. And And it was so cool working with coming up with things that neither of us would ever have come upon if we had just been creating music on our own. Like one example I'm thinking of is our Antarctica collaborator, very sweet woman named Andrea, who we got in touch with through friends, housemates, supervisor who's a director at some research base down there, and who was able to put us in touch with this woman, Andrea, who ended up recording some glockenspiel lines for us, or glockenspiel samples. And that was a bit different from how we did most of the other collaborations for the album, where it was more like, hey, okay, here's an existing song foundation. It would be awesome if you could record a top line over this, or a guitar solo, or whatever. But with this, it was more like you're all we got. I don't know a lot of musicians in Antarctica. We want to make this easy for you. And so you can record, just like, send us anything. And what she sent us was really fun. It was this super cheery, very major sounding glockenspiel recording, ding, 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 very warm, fuzzy, which is not at all something that I would have stumbled upon or even thought to ask for. But I think the result ended up being really fun. And it was just so far outside of anything that either of us would have come up with. That's just, yeah, that's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah, that's it, right? Like the combination of things. A lot of times it brings out like what, even in you would do things you wouldn't normally do just because of the fact that you're doing it with another person. Yeah,
definitely. There was pretty much all of the collaborators. I think the style of the track that each of our collaborators from each of the continents collaborated on, it was not at all something that was really inside of their musical comfort zone, I don't think. We were working with a young man, Ivan. I think he might have various aliases, but for this project, a young man named Ivan from India. We sent him the track that ended up being the first track on the album, Trapped. And he got back to us being like, yeah, like, sounds really cool, by the way. Like, I mostly do indie rock. This is pretty different from anything I've done, but I'll try. They sent us, of course, these beautifully recorded, perfectly tuned vocals, nice harmonies, catchy choruses. It was very different from, I think, anything that he had worked on. And this Trapped, it has a trap beat, which I also don't usually do. I just had a feeling that his particular style would work well with it, even though I didn't. It's just not, like, his vocals weren't something that I would necessarily associate with the style of the song, but it ended up being really cool. I think sometimes it's a matter of kind of finagling two very different musical styles into one song, but when it works really cool. It works really well.
How did you get in touch with all the collaborators? Are these people you already knew, or did you reach out some way?
Yeah, all sorts of different ways. A couple of them were folks that we had already been in touch with. A friend of mine, Usama from Pakistan, we had worked, I know him, he's a friend of mine from Pakistan, but by way of Berlin. We had collaborated on a few songs together. He ended up recording just a guitar solo that goes in the middle of that song I was talking about, Trapped, which just gives me chills every time I listen to it. And another buddy, Espen, from originally from UK, but also by way of Berlin. So both people in my inner circle. And Espen is one of those people who great singer-songwriter, writes really off-the-wall lyrics, and that are super fun to work with. And also the kind of person who, by the way, I try to have people like this in every project that I work on. People who, when I'm on draft 27 of a song, I have no idea what anything sounds like. I don't even know if it sounds like music anymore. Just someone who I can contact and be like, so that song, by the way, I have no idea what it sounds like. I'd really love your ears. And then we would, at various points, do a call. And of course, he would make everything sound super easy and just very doable. And great to have, side note, but great to have people like that, just who can kind of jump in at various different points of the creative process, as opposed to just being like, here's the vocals, like, good luck. But yeah, so those are just a couple people who we're already in touch with. Other than that, reaching out to friends, musician friends, the internet. We didn't really limit ourselves too much with just like, we need to find people through like a specific avenue. Basically, if we found someone whose music we liked and thought would work well with the project, then yeah, we hit them up and saw if they would be interested in collaborating.
Right, that's cool. Going to open mic nights is a great way to meet people like that.
Yeah, definitely.
You run into all walks of life in those places, and
yes,
people of
absolutely,
ages and styles.
Yeah, that's how Espen and I linked up. We went to, I think, the last open mic that either of us went to before COVID hit in Berlin, and we were going to meet up to work on a song in person, but then COVID reared its ugly head, and we ended up collaborating via Zoom, which ended up being, in the moment, it was like this like revolutionary thing, and Espen was dragging around, controlling my screen, dragging MIDI notes around in Ableton on my computer, and came up with this wonky melody. And of course now it's like, yeah, collaboration with Zoom is not this big exciting thing, but yeah, that was us getting our dipping our toes into that world.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's in some weird way like part of the sonic stamp. The fact that he's actually controlling your computer over Zoom, which is something you'd probably never really want to do anymore.
Yeah.
But, that I'm sure that had an effect on the results. And
yeah, totally. It was very clunky. And in that particular song where he was dragging notes around on my screen, I'm pretty sure it was just kind of at random. And it just so happened that we came up with this interesting little hook, like six notes. But yeah, it definitely, the medium definitely does leave a stamp on the product.
For anyone that might be interested in going through that, what kind of software are you using to connect that way?
Nothing fancy. So in that case, it was just, I think like the screen share option of Zoom, and there's the mouse control option. And
is there a mouse control? You can.
There is a mouse control option, or at least there was at the time. I'm not sure of the exact steps to set that up, but it was nothing like super. It wasn't a special program for that.
Right. Well, that's cool. I didn't know that was a feature.
Yeah, try it out. Give it a whirl.
Yeah, if I ever want to really do a very long and tedious session with someone.
Yes, if you're a masochist, it's great.
Yeah, but in those situations, that was, again, great. We had that, for us.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
It's funny you brought up Antarctica first, because when I first checked this out, the first thing I looked for was like, what about Antarctica? It was the first thing that popped in my mind. Is like, all right, I can understand like all the other places, but what about that?
Yeah.
So that's cool that you were able to figure that out. So is she, this might be a really stupid question. Is she a permanent resident there, or is anyone a permanent resident there?
I don't think she was born there. but that's not necessarily what you're asking. I think how it usually works is that people down there, they might go for like a season or like 6 month, like a 6 month shift.
Summertime
And
down there, I guess. And
yeah, I guess there are some people who are there in the winter also, but yeah, I don't think there are any like permanent residents. There aren't really any towns or grocery stores.
it kind of opened my eyes to something that I feel like I should have known.
I don't
when I
know
was,
why you would have needed to know
but
that.
yeah, I don't know. I just never really thought too hard about that.
I didn't either.
But it's cool that you managed to do that, though. You managed to get that together.
Yeah, I'm stoked that it all worked out, and it really had a good experience with all the collaborators, which isn't necessarily something that I take for granted with collaboration, especially working with people who I've never collaborated with before in the past. I just don't really know what to expect. But
Yeah.
in this case, it all worked out super well. With South America, we ended up collaborating with a singer, Clementine, with this really beautiful kind of ethereal voice, which just worked really well with the track that we were collaborating on, which it was kind of a little bit on the trippy side. And she was also just super sweet and has been super helpful with volunteering. Be like, oh yeah, by the way, I have like this other band project. I can share you our release plan and some of the she's been super generous with sharing her knowledge and experience from other projects, which has been really cool. And let's see, from Australia, we collaborated with a jazz musician, Lasmar. I'm not actually sure that he would describe himself as a jazz musician, but I guess in my book, anyone who plays in time signatures that are not 4/4 are jazz musicians. Yeah, he's also a great producer, and it's really fun working with other producers just since yeah, there's kind of maybe more of a jumping off point than in other cases where as the producer team or as the sole producer, you'd have to come up with the basis on your own. For the song we made with Lasmar, he sent us actually a track that he had pretty much recorded and just hadn't released, and we more or less did a remix of it. But and again, just super different styles, but ended up converging and creating something that that still has like the distinct fingerprint of each artist, but that is just not anything that I would have come up with on my own.
Right.
And for North America, we worked with a woman, Danaik, also super beautiful voice, super soulful singer. And this song, it's Ain't Nobody. It's I believe the third track. It's actually something that I had sketched maybe 4 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, when I was greener to production, and I made a draft and recorded a demo with a friend, but I didn't really feel that I had the production experience back then to do it justice. But I liked the idea, and for this project ended up revisiting it, and then yeah, Danaik just killed it. Yeah, so that's something I do not take for granted, that it works the first time with everyone who I haven't collaborated with before. That was the case for this project. I am very thankful. But yeah, I kind of think we just got lucky with that one.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, sometimes magical things happen, but
Yeah,
sometimes, it just, for whatever reason, there's a
yeah,
million reasons why, I guess, but sometimes just doesn't work.
yeah.
How did you, do you think that you did anything to make it easy for it to work? Did you have any like kind of approach in this that,
I don't think I did anything to make it easy. It was, like some things definitely worked out, and I'm very pleased with how the album turned out. But as far as things that made it easy, I would say just building a team around it, kind of from the get-go, was really helpful. Since I knew this would be kind of this all-consuming thing that would take twice as long as however long I thought it would take, and I definitely wanted to do something that was outside of the paradigm that I had been working in before that, where I was blunderbuss. I was the kooky solo artist who slaps the bass and plays an Ableton push, and I wanted it to be collaborative in the sense of, okay, we're collaborating with all these musicians, but also that it wouldn't just be my project. Since, at the end of a project like this, or any project, it's just so much more fun to be like, oh, we did that. Like, yeah, we did that, instead of like, yeah, I did that. It's just like, that's it's just much more fun to be able to share the journey, since like this has been going on for over 2 years, and so most of it has been journey, and so I'm glad that it wasn't just me kind of struggling for 2 years, and there were a lot of people who helped out in big ways and small ways. Some people who were involved for the whole project. Some people who just kind of swooped in to help out with whatever we needed. And I've never asked for so much help before, like for anything, than for this project. But we had like some folks who I had been friends with and I'd known before this project, and then some people who just thought it was a cool idea and hopped on board, like a guy, Kevin, in Germany, who has been sort of a mentor for the project basically since the get-go, which has been sort of one of the project anchors. And then a friend of mine, Jeremy, who super creative person, the kind of person who, just to give you a sense of some of the personalities involved with this project, Jeremy's the kind of person who will show up to like a potluck dinner with a garbage bag full of thousands of poems that he generated with AI, and then he'll just hand around the garbage bag full of AI poems and tell everyone to grab a handful. And it just also been super, another sort of mentor of the project, and someone who I can chat with and help figure out problems as they come up, or figure out directions to go in. And then just like all sorts of things. But sorry, what was your question, Brian?
Well, I was really just thinking about, for you to be, what is it, 7 different people on,
right,
and then a couple other people too.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So
what are the
that's
things
a
that
lot
made
of people
it easier?
to get it right with.
Yeah. Well, what made it easier? That's where I was going. Just having people around me so that it wasn't just my thing. And there were some points of the project that were pretty difficult. And just, I guess it was a combination of having told so many people about what we were doing already, and having other people kind of invest in the project, and who were at least part of like a broader support network for the project, were both really helpful. Since I think if it had just been blunderbuss in collaboration with this artist, then not necessarily that it wouldn't we wouldn't have finished it, but just it would have been a much lonelier journey.
Hmm. Well, you also get the more investment probably from the others. This is,
And just other people's energy, and
yeah. Yeah, right. That ownership, I guess, of it.
yes.
Hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Because, yeah, like you pointed out, it's a lot of people to be able to work with and to get it right. How do
Yeah,
you how does it normally start? Do you have like tracks that you're sending out or like little ideas, or is it different every time?
it's different every time. There wasn't like a single Sonic 7 official workflow by any means.
Yeah.
And there were some tracks that maybe started as a sketch that I was not expecting to use or even finish, but then just ended up thinking, oh, actually, that would be really cool to use. And then some tracks that we started with high hopes that we didn't end up using. But yeah, I'm pretty workflow agnostic and always down to try new stuff. So, well, that's a whole big topic, but there was no magic formula whatsoever.
Right, right. Yeah, that's cool. You gave me some funny things to talk about. Or at least a
Yeah,
couple of them were kind of funny. You sent me just earlier today. I wanted to ask you about one of them that you wrote. Is the first one
sure.
too.
Yeah, go for it.
Peanut butter and music production.
Peanut butter and music
You said
production.
that'd be a
Yes.
good, interesting fodder for later today.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, all right, I want to hear about
Peanut
that.
butter. Yeah. Okay. So glad you asked. Yeah. I guess the root of that is seemingly meaningless changes in every day and how those can help with music production. I will explain. So another one of my Corona projects in Berlin was making peanut butter. Since everyone was hoarding toilet paper and hand sanitizer and apparently peanut butter, which is something that I noticed, at least because I eat a lot of peanut butter. So ended up making peanut butter in my housemate's food processor. And I just find so often that little experiments in my everyday life, or just even slight changes that I will do to how I normally do things, will make it easier to make bigger changes in music and just not get stuck in musical ruts. For example, in the case of peanut butter, I start out just making very like generic, boring peanut butter, just ground peanuts, maybe a little bit of salt, and kind of got that down. And then started getting a bit more experimental with it. And I was taking suggestions from friends, and maybe with this batch I'll add in a little bit of nutmeg, a little bit of coconut oil. That was probably the best, coconut oil. And maybe with this one I'll just throw in a whole banana into the blender and add that in, so it's banana peanut butter. Or, I don't know, like chive peanut butter. And I think all of that experimentation, I kind of noticed how that was working on my music production, where when I'll just make little variations to my daily habits, like, maybe I'll just add cayenne pepper to this batch of peanut butter, or maybe I'll take this way home instead of this way that I usually get. I find that when I'm sitting in front of my computer working on a song, just the little micro decisions that I make in my non-music life can kind of help train certain muscles that are helpful in music production. And if I'm in the habit of regularly making these little tiny changes or little tiny experiments, it makes it a lot easier to just be more boldly experimental when I'm composing. And sometimes I'll get so deep into a track that I'll get married to the way a track sounds, even though I know it sounds bad, but I've heard it in its current form for so long that I just can't really bear the thought of doing anything significant to change it. I find when I'm making just little meaningless changes to the things that I do outside of music, it's much easier to not get stuck in that and just be like, okay, like this song needs drastic action to be saved. Like, let's cut out this synth, let's find a new chord progression, let's cut out this B section, let's write a new A section, blah, blah, all that stuff. And if for some reason I just think of that with the peanut butter example, especially because just with these like non-music experiments, the cost of experimenting is generally so low. And like, to be quite honest, I've made some pretty fucking weird peanut butter. But like, at the end of the day, okay, it's just peanut butter. And the cost to experimenting inside of Ableton or Logic or whatever, is also very low, but it's just, I don't think humans are hardwired to really tolerate certain kinds of risk. We're not hardwired for a situation in which there's infinite undo or we can create multiple versions. So for me, at least, it's still scary to make a major change in a track. But when I just make little seemingly meaningless experiments in my day-to-day, then I find that really does make some things easier when I'm actually sitting in front of my DAW.
I get that. It's a funny example, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. Because you're just getting used to trying stuff out, seeing what if, and also, you sound like you weren't super invested in how the peanut butter came out. You're like, what the hell? Let's give it a shot.
I ate all of it.
But we get really caught up in how our music turns out sometimes. And I think, I know when I get stuck, when I'm afraid to do things, and I get that feeling too sometimes where I've got something that I've heard so many times, I can't understand any possible way to change it, even though I know it needs a lot of work.
Yeah.
But when it's less important or at least I'm not taking it so seriously, then you're kind of like, what the hell? Let's give it a shot. You don't mind kind of taking that risk. And you're probably right about our nature too, in that if we're really tying up so much into our music, like, what are people going to think about me if I make this song? Then we're dealing with like really deep-seated human needs for acceptance. We don't survive 100,000 years ago if we're not accepted by the tribe, right?
Yeah.
So if we start conflating that with like, if my drum sounds stupid because I did this weird thing to it, I'm not going to survive. It happens though, where and sometimes I'm able to take a step back and say like, I'm just making like noise. I'm just making sounds. It's kind of silly. It's not really that big a deal, but we've grown so close to what we do, and we, to us, music is so important. But if you can take that step back, and I can see how taking a different way home just gets your mind going a different way, because when you drive the same way all the time, for instance, you often find yourself at that place and have no recollection of actually driving there.
Right.
You're just somewhere else. And when you take the different route, you start saying, oh, look at that. I didn't see that store there. And you notice things that I guess your mind is just in a more open state. And I'm sure that translates into when you're making music.
Yeah, it's definitely training some of the same muscles. Yeah, it was as you were talking, it made me think of just some other little, I don't know, tools that are helpful for not getting stuck in those ruts. And I think a big one is also just time, like time away from something. And with this project, it was so long term that which is not necessarily how I always like to work, but it allowed for that space. Like if I got really stuck on a song, some of them I kind of ditched for like a year, and then came back to with fresh ears and thought, okay, like I don't really care about this as much as I did when I was living and breathing this song for hours every night. And so just that space away can really be helpful. Also, I'll do another thing. I call it the name for this little exercise. I call it like 3 minutes, fuck everything up. And it'll just be usually at the start of a production session, or actually whenever I think I need it, where I'll just take a song that I'm working on. I will save a new draft, and at the start of the title, I'll just write fuck up. And then I'll set a timer for 3 minutes. And then for that 3 minutes, I will just do anything I can to fuck everything up in the song. In any way possible. I'll drag in just like whole other songs into the grid, unquantize the grid, play like a horrible melody with a horrible patch on my MIDI keyboard and record that, add a bunch of automation. So it's just this cacophony. And that, I find that sometimes is enough to kind of lose that sense of preciousness around the song. Just to break through that crust so I can actually make changes that actually make sense. But yeah, those are a couple other things that I found helpful.
Yeah, I did that in the project with my band that we're still waiting for vinyl records.
All right.
A long time now, but with the vocals, I'd recorded the vocals and I had some crazy chain of stuff on it to try to hide behind, essentially. And I saved all those projects as a new song, and I think it was called like Vocal Experiment. And it was just like, I'm just gonna, if I ruin it, I ruin it. Who cares?
Right.
But doing that just freed me, because I knew I still had the old thing to fall back on. But that became the version that I worked on, for every single song.
It's funny how that ends up happening.
Yeah, like I did it as like a throwaway day. It's like, what the hell? Let's just try this thing, and and that wound up being the sessions I used with those throwaway copies. So just having that kind of fearlessness to just say, oh well, you can always come back to where you were. Yeah,
definitely. I would say in my experience, the vast majority of times where I've done that, I have not ended up using the version that I'm screwing everything up on. But yeah, that can totally happen, where you just stumble upon gold that way.
It might even just renew your appreciation for what you had. What you
appreciation
ruined.
for what you had. Yeah, by comparison.
Man, I was in such a good kind of like if in life, if all kinds of terrible things happen to you, you'd be thrilled to come back to this very moment with whatever problems you have in your life right now.
Right.
It can always kind of get worse, sort of thing. So same thing with your music.
There's so much that can go wrong.
Make it go wrong in the music world where it's not, life and death, and then come back to it and be like, all right, not bad. You mentioned also in that email, reaching the song's fuck yeah point.
Yeah. Reaching the song's fuck yeah point. That's kind of... so I have a theory that every song has a fuck yeah point. And what I mean by that is, at least in my case, it's the point when I'm working on a song where it takes all the willpower I have to turn off loop mode because I'm grooving so hard, bouncing up and down so hard, and just kind of saying either in my head or out loud, fuck yeah, like that is it. Like it's just when you win the decision lottery and just pick the right kick sample or add in the right background Foley and the right chord progression, it just something kind of goes and it all clicks together. That's the fuck yeah point. It's the point where you just do not want to turn off loop. And I think at that point in the creative process, like if you reach that point, or if I reach that point, like I know it's going to be a pretty cool song, and I would really have to, I would have to try, or not try, but it would be very hard to really screw it up at that point. And so that's kind of my goal when I'm starting a song, is like, let's not worry about anything later in the process. Let's just worry about reaching the fuck yeah point. Because so many times when I've been working on a track and I've tried to fill out the arrangement and it just focus on the big picture before there's anything that really excites me to the point that it induces some kind of physical reaction in my body, or just me wanting to bounce up and down forever, then it's probably not going to go anywhere. And it's time to either scrap that and start something new, or just go back to an earlier state and try to get to the fuck yeah point. And I'm thinking of like, I think every song where I have that intensity of feeling about at least certain elements of it being really cool. Like I remember that moment with every song where it's like, oh, I remember the fuck yeah point of Trapped, this first song on the album, where it was like last summer, it was Friday afternoon, and I was composing actually in Kharkiv, Ukraine, and had this standing desk set up, just like a chair on top of a table with a view of, like in front of a window with a view of the city of Kharkiv, and there's this big, like, you know, those classic onion-shaped golden domes on the top of Orthodox churches. There's just one of those sort of in the center of my field of vision. I'm just listening to the song through laptop speakers and just bouncing up and down, like, oh yeah, it's going to be a good one. Yeah, so I'm not sure quite what the lesson is in that, but just that's something that I do. Like if there's a fuck yeah point to the song, then like we're good. Let's finish this, and it's going to be cool pretty much no matter what. But if I don't get to that for a given song, then I usually end up scrapping those projects.
Yeah, that makes sense, because if you're not feeling it, then something's off, I guess. You know?
Yeah.
You might as well put your attention other places.
Yeah.
I love working standing up. You're a bass player, and I'm a guitar player, and that's kind of like the natural way you play most of the time,
right?
Standing up. So I do have this table right beside me is like countertop height, which is really nice. You can stand and be comfortable.
Nice.
And sometimes that makes all the difference, because you start moving, and when you catch yourself kind of like, all right, oh, look at me. I'm like, sometimes sitting in the desk is so like clinical. You might as well be, doing like expense reports or something.
Yeah.
It's the same exact like body position, and you get tired, the blood's not flowing, your leg's falling asleep. But when you're
definitely. I did find that I would definitely get tired a lot just sitting and composing.
What did you mean by decision lottery?
Decision lottery. Yeah. Good question.
This seems like an interesting way to think about doing things in music.
When I'm making a song, I do kind of view it as like I'm digging for gold, where like like not everything that I sketch is, I don't like everything that I sketch. And I mean, that would be, I think, pretty incredible if I did, but usually I'll have to come up with a lot of crap, frankly, until I find something that I'm really stoked on. And try as I might to kind of tease out what's the magic formula. Like I really don't believe that there is one. And so like, I think when I do find something that I think works really well, it does feel kind of like I just won the decision lottery, or like I won the lottery. Like it was just this chain of decisions that I happened to download this free sample pack last week, and I happened to look through it now. I happened to drag out this kick sample, and my friend just happened to send me this guitar riff, and I just happened to put everything together in this combination such that I got something that I was excited about. And I could be just as have just as much energy and just as much motivation to make a good song on another day, but it might just not click. So I do think there is kind of an element of randomness in it, and just like digging for buried treasure, where it's like sometimes I might dig like a 6-foot hole and I just don't find anything, and then the next day too, and then it just so happens that occasionally I will stumble upon something that something that has potential. But it really does feel semi-random.
Yeah, there's a lot of stars that align. When you really think about it, the fact that you even decided to sit down today, the fact that maybe you didn't sit, you stood, or the fact that with the sun shine through the window the right way, or
exactly. But, butterfly flapping its wings and
right on one corner of the world 4,000 years ago.
Right.
I think more and more I'm seeing my music making is just decisions. It's not, if you don't make your decisions, nothing happens and you get stuck. So it's just all about more and more to me to just like dive headfirst into every decision more and more, and just kind of hope. I like the way you put it, the decision lottery, that you've selected the right numbers and they come up. But I think and also I guess to continue the lottery, metaphor, you have to be in it to win it, and the more tickets you buy, the more your chances are.
True.
And if you overthink things, if you second guess, maybe I should go switch that snare and then things will sound better. But I find most of the time, once I start thinking that way, I stall out. Those projects don't get done. And I question enough things in a row, and then I'm starting to think like, maybe I'm hungry. Maybe the dogs want to go out. Maybe the dishes should be done now. Anything almost to get out of that. But my best moments are really when I'm just kind of, with pure trust in the process, or just faith, trust falling kind of thing, where just fall into it, just do that and go, and then do that. It works especially well, I think, in a collaborative situation, when you can get a couple people together that all feel that way. So when you decide like, these are the chords, and then they're like, well, then this is the beat. Whoops.
Right.
And everything moves in a direction, and sometimes it might be stupid or not really that interesting, but it's never going to be anything if we're always like, should these be the chords? Should that be the beat? I don't know. Maybe not. It's a way less fun way of, I guess that's life too, right? Like, should we see that movie? I don't know. We could see it. Instead of like, let's see that movie. Yeah.
Right? Yeah, definitely. And it's hard to kind of do something with full conviction when you're just, when something isn't working quite right, you're not quite sure what to do about it. And I find with every song, even the projects that might have started out as like, oh, this is like as flowy as it gets and everything will just come together, that flow will only take me so far. And after that point, it's like, all right, we walk from here. And it's just this process of like, all right, well, like there's this weird resonance or some mud here, and there's a lot of fine tuning, even with the songs that maybe wrote themselves for 95% of the process. That remaining 5% will be like, will be a lot of heavy lifting.
I like that about now it's time to walk. Because, we like this idea of getting in the flow state. There's books written about it and all that. And there is something there, something that kind of magical happens. But it's a ride, that's destined to end. And there's not a lot of gas in that tank.
Right. So, at some point you got to get out and push the car. And,
Well, I think we forget that. We expect, and we definitely romanticize being creative, being an artist is like you get in a flow, man, and it just all happens. And, it's just on that day, Like maybe if you're real fast and lucky, you can like crank out a good amount of the material, like write a lot of the song, but there is that point where you have to sort of say, okay, all right, we got pretty far on this flow stuff. But like you said, now it's time to do the work.
Right.
Now it's time to, clean it up and take it home.
Yeah, definitely. I think that kind of in the past and still now sometimes I've gotten caught up in kind of this whole question of like flow and natural creativity, and that's been kind of I might say like a source of insecurity for me, like creative insecurity, where I'm not someone who like music does not just ooze out of my pores while I'm sleeping. And I know people who seem to be like that, where they're just they will just produce or play guitar or whatever, do something creative, paint a picture all night. They won't sleep. They'll forget to eat and go to the bathroom, and they'll just keep doing their thing. And it's just like the air they breathe. And that's never been the case for me, really. And I'll have, I would say at best, brief moments where it seems like things are just kind of coming out of me. And I've frequently had this sense of like, well, if I was a real musician, then I would be like creating while I sleep, and this would be just what I do as a release. And music has never totally been a release for me. It definitely, like, it's nice when it feels like play, but a lot of the time it does feel like work. And I guess I've kind of made my peace with that in recent years and just figured, okay, like, I have what I have. I was dealt the hand that I was given. And if I have maybe not as much flow as I would like to, that's okay. I'm just going to do the best I can, and not overanalyze what that might say about my natural creativity.
Yeah, I've felt that around some people in the past, but I've also seen them struggle with it too. You know, and also doing this podcast. yeah, that's what I say sometimes. Like, it's not that I want you to suffer too. I just want to know I'm not alone here.
Yeah.
But doing the podcast, I haven't had anyone come on and say like, it's actually pretty easy, Brian. You know, I just have it. I just know what I'm doing.
Just got lucky, I guess.
Yeah, it's not like that. And also, you know, for anyone just listening right now, you're sitting, you said, in your mom's art studio. Mm-hmm. So you're visiting there, and you've got right away when you turned on your camera, I was like, oh wow, there's a lot of cool paintings and this art, you know, brushes, and it looks not just like paintings that somebody put on the wall, but you can see there's like work going on in there. Right. So your mom is an artist of some kind, right?
Yes.
So you have this, like, technically, like, it's in your blood, you know, you're the artist. And I think a lot of people feel if they don't have that, they don't have like family that was doing art or music or whatever. Like maybe it's not in them, they don't have that gene or they don't have that DNA. But I also see it sometimes in the exact opposite way where like, I'm supposed to have this, look, I'm surrounded by my mom's paintings and,
Right.
you know, where is it today? So it seems like it's like a universal thing. Like sometimes you just feel like I don't have it. I don't understand.
Yeah.
There are some days I feel like a wizard and I'm like so empowered. I can do so much and I feel great. And then other days I like either pick up my instrument or just try to like finish a song and I'm just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Have I been lying to myself like all this time?
Yeah. I think you and I, having been through that many times, both, I'm guessing, and seen that it really just is this kind of wave that goes up and down. Like sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. I think it's easier to kind of conceptualize it as something that just kind of happens to us. Whereas like the first time that I made a song that I was really stoked on, I thought it was just this amazing piece of art. And I was like, all right, well, I guess that's the bar that I've set for myself. And then the next song, it was just complete trash. And I was like, what happened? Like, what did, like, I must have messed up the recipe or something. But I guess having had that pattern happen so many times, it becomes clear that it's like, no, you just kind of gotta like hold on and ride it out.
Yeah, like the improvement slope is not a smooth ride. It has many pits and valleys in it. It would feel like setbacks. But I'm trying not to be as, I guess, like emotionally involved in that, and just kind of be like, this is just part of what happens. Here I am. I'm in the low point now. I won't be one day. I wasn't the other day. But it's weird. And it's really hard to predict what it is that determines that. I haven't found like, is it I didn't get enough sleep? It doesn't seem to be any specific ingredient that I can put my finger on. I've been up all night long, tired as hell, making great music, and then fully rested and completely inept. So it's definitely it's a rough ride. It is.
Yeah.
It's fun. And I do try to remember that that's why it's exciting. Because, if it worked out perfectly every time, I imagine you'd get a little tired of that. After a while, I'd probably be like, all right, I can make a song.
I don't know.
I'd probably start trying to make songs in like the middle of traffic now. I'd need a little more danger involved. Maybe I need like some kind of alligator in here with me, just something to bring the thrill of it. But I do think I do think it's the potential that it won't work. That makes it exciting as well. But I know what you mean too. It's like, I'd like to test that theory out.
Sure. No, it reminds me of so I studied actually ecology in school, and I remember nothing except for this thing called, I want to say it's the intermediate disturbance hypothesis. Are you familiar with that by any chance?
No, that's a great band name, though.
I think it's free. So the intermediate disturbance hypothesis, if I remember it correctly, it always stuck with me for some reason, but it was just the theory that in an ecosystem, there is like an optimal amount of disruption in the ecosystem, and if there's too much disruption, then the ecosystem can't rebuild itself quickly enough to handle the disruption. But if there's too little disruption, then certain species will basically dominate the other species, and there will be less diversity. But when there's this kind of sweet spot of disruption, like, okay, the ecosystem can bounce back from like natural disasters or just like some kind of sudden thing that changes the landscape. But there's also no species are just taking over the entire forest or the entire jungle or savanna. And I think about that sometimes with music production, where I just I don't necessarily have like a large body of documentation to support this, but I've noticed that some of the things that I've made that I like the most have been from periods where there's kind of there's some kind of healthy, exciting amount of upheaval going on in my personal circumstances. Maybe I just moved and I'm just like subletting a place for a few weeks until I move into my new place. Or then on the opposite end of the spectrum, if my life is in complete chaos, then probably not making much music. But also if I get really settled into a groove and have optimized my workspace and just kind of have my just am a little too comfortable in my setup, I just might not be as creative as I would be if there was some kind of like sweet spot of disturbance in my life, which I don't know that I would ever like seek that out necessarily, since life sometimes just happens. But yeah, it's just something I think about.
Yeah, but that sounds like it applies to a lot of stuff, actually. This is why I was thinking, did he really get someone from Antarctica? Are people able to make music in the South Pole? Like
yeah, there's a really big glockenspiel scene down there.
Yeah. Parents, like they want their kids, to have a better life than them. They want things to be easier. They don't want them to have too much trouble. But a lot of times it's those problems, those obstacles that a kid has to face that builds their character and makes them stronger.
Right.
And even your body, right? Like if you overwork out that's too much chaos, your muscles can't keep up with that. They fall apart. You get injured. But if you don't have enough, then they just kind of atrophy and nothing really happens.
Yeah. Same with music.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense too with what you were saying about the peanut butter and music production philosophy, that just inserting like that kind of novelty in your life, something a little different, a little that you're not used to. Maybe it's discomfort, even though it's making peanut butter, but you don't know what you're doing yet, right? Like you're in a new place, you're in a new apartment or whatever it is. There's that kind of, not quite settled, but not in total danger either.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I like that. That's very interesting. And I think a lot of good comes out of us when we're challenged to like a certain point. And I think, what was I listening to someone talk? I remember I was down here. I don't remember exactly what it was, but talking about like this point of difficulty where there's kind of like this optimal point where it's like a little bit past what we can handle. Just a little bit. Not where it's impossible and then you give up, but where it's just enough that I might be able to do that.
Right.
I think I can do that. And I guess, with making music, it's very rare when you're done that you're like, there it is. That's the thing, Even the stuff that I feel great about, I could probably look at and say, well, I obviously didn't understand so much about mixing back then, or I probably should have toned this down a little in retrospect. Right. But that point of being just hard enough.
Yeah. Biting off a little bit more than you can comfortably chew.
Yeah.
That's where the good stuff comes out, or a lot of it.
I imagine you must have felt like that with this project. To get people from all over the world. How am I going to find people from all over the world? How are we going to do this? We can't get together anymore.
Right.
You're now presented with challenges that you need to do some creative thinking to solve.
Yeah, there were a few of those. I guess the one, uh, probably most dramatic one. Well, I'll maybe give a little bit of background, just kind of general overview of the progression of this project. I so in 2021, we got the grant to make this project happen in fall 2020, and in 2021 we started looking around for collaborators and kind of laying the groundwork for the project, and then started composing. So I had been living in Berlin for the past 4 years, and my visa actually expired, which wasn't this huge surprise, but it meant that I had to leave Berlin, which was had been my home for several years, but it was okay. And I wasn't really stoked on the idea of going directly back to the US. But I wasn't really allowed to stay in a lot of places in Europe, in the Schengen zone after my visa expired. So I decided to make a pit stop in Ukraine, and went to Kharkiv, Ukraine in last summer, 2021, and was composing from there, and ended up moving there, and was continuing to work on Single Sonic 7 remotely. And I ended up leaving. I got my stuff out of Ukraine and brought it back to Berlin actually in February 2022, about 10 days before the war started. And that was, it's funny because it was like a tough period in general, but it ended up being a good thing for the project. I'll go into that a bit since it takes a little bit more explaining. After leaving Ukraine, I had this kind of like floating feeling, like being an astronaut who had gotten disconnected from their spaceship and was just kind of soaring through the ether. Had originally left with the idea that, okay, maybe this will all blow over in a couple months. Maybe it's just a big bluff. That quickly became clear that it was not a bluff, and that Ukraine did get invaded. I had a couple main anchors in my life at that point. One of those anchors was this project. It was just kind of a focusing theme. And another anchor was someone very close to me in Ukraine, very close friend, and someone very, very significant to my life story. And someone who has helped me with some very essential things. And that friend ended up getting stuck in a part of Ukraine that got occupied very early on in the war. We were calling pretty much every day since the start of the war. I had already left. We were trying to support each other, and I didn't really felt pretty powerless about what I could do to help. So the best that I could think of was finding symbolic ways to support this particular friend. And so I said, hey, like, this album that I've been working on for a couple years, this is for you. Like, I'm dedicating this for you, which obviously is of zero practical benefit to someone caught in a war zone. But that was one of the very few things that I felt like, okay, this is something that I can do. And then I went back, after it became clear that, like, okay, this isn't blowing over anytime soon, I went back to Northern California where my folks live and where I grew up, and was still talking with my friend pretty much every day when she had internet access, and composed like I had never composed in my life. And so on the one hand, it was not an easy period just because of like life happening. But it was also very good creatively because I've experimented a lot and really gone off the deep end with finding different things to motivate me to make better music, and to just make music at all. And like, I have never composed with such a fire under my ass as I did when I said, hey, like, this is your album now. For the basically spring of 2022, I was bouncing around for a few months between the various dwellings of friends, and including, like, for the first month I was up at a mountainside cabin in the woods of Northern California, owned by some family friends. Thank you, Madeline Maria. Then bounced around at a couple other friends' places and with my parents. I'll just talk about, like, the cabin, for example, because it was kind of it was an interesting contrast of experiences and emotions, because on the one hand, it was this kind of like super chill, like romantic, like archetype of like the eccentric artist life. I think I had been reading a couple pages in The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, where he's talking about going up to some little tiny town, renting some little place, and just typing on his typewriter until he finished his novel. And I was like, I want to do that. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of got to have that experience for a month or so, just composing up at this beautiful cabin in the woods. And so on the one hand, it was very chill, but on the other hand, it was my primary association with that time is the feeling of adrenaline, because my life basically for a few months was basically finishing this project, composing Single Sonic 7, wrapping up the remaining collaborations, just composing, mixing, doing everything, and then still talking with my friend every day. I guess I bring up adrenaline because it was my heart's racing right now. Actually, it was there was my like chill artist existence by day, composing, and then my friend who usually call at night because there's a 10-hour time difference, and after a certain point, the internet went out in her part of Ukraine, and so she would have to borrow a car to drive for an hour through the occupied territory to work in like a place where there's internet. Sometimes it would be like in a parking lot outside of a store, or in like a empty classroom. I would hear her updates on the situation, which they were not good most of the time. And this was still very early on in the conflict when things were moving very quickly. And so sometimes, like I'm someone who, when I compose, I have phone on airplane mode, and like I just like I don't use my phone. Like I try very hard to limit distractions from phone, from social media, and I always turn my phone off at night. Except for this period, I had my phone on next to my pillow at all times, and sometimes I would just wake up in the middle of the night with my friend calling, and I would just kind of like jerk awake, and my heart would start pounding, and talk with my friend and just see what's up. And her updates were generally more exciting than mine. She'd ask, like, "So how's the album coming?" um, and uh, yeah, so that that's what comes to mind when I think of like what were the biggest challenges of the projects. Where like the biggest challenges were by far not creative challenges. But I think like it's weird how it works. Like even I think the most challenging external circumstances in my life ended up like really helping out with with the creative side. And actually some of the like for the past 2 years, I had been working on the project sometimes as something that I was putting a lot of time into every week, and sometimes very much as a back burner project. And uh, but yeah, it wasn't until like shit hit the fan that it was like, okay, like now this, like this is it. This is what I'm doing. And I think the biggest challenges up until that point, like before everything happened that I just told you about, the bigger challenges were more just like maintaining maintaining momentum with the project, moving things along. If collaborators backed out, then finding new folks to work with, or just kind of making sure that would happen. And there were a couple points where I thought like, oh, maybe I can just kind of like not do this and hope that everyone forgets that I told them about it. But yeah, when this situation arose with my friend, it was like, nope, this is this isn't just your art project now. So yeah.
Yeah, that sounds like a really tough situation to, just in general, of course. But to then, keep going and to move forward. I could imagine an alternate timeline, maybe where it's like, what's the point too?
Right.
But I
Yeah.
guess, dedicating that also kind of gives you a point.
Yeah. It definitely did. And that, you're right, that definitely isn't the only way that scenario could have played out. Like I was thinking like, okay, maybe it's time to just like scrap this project or just put it on hold indefinitely and just focus on other stuff. Since I didn't really see how it fit in with like my life at that moment, leaving
Yeah.
Ukraine. But yeah, looking back, I'm really glad that uh, really glad that I stuck it out. Really good that we stuck it out.
Hmm. Yeah, it's good to have something to turn to, you know. Um, and you might even think of it as a distraction, but just to maybe not that way, but just to channel the energy through, to
Mm.
put it into something. Um, I know when things get tough, I usually find myself eventually, at least, getting to something musical, creative. It's just
Mm.
kind of the default where things go. It doesn't always happen right away, and there are definitely points where I might just be like, "Why? What's the point? Who cares?"
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm thankful I have that in my life, and it sounds like it was something that helped you, push through that time too.
Yeah, it definitely did. And it was, like I mentioned, it was kind of like a period of unparalleled creativity and just musical productivity for me. And I've tried all sorts of kooky ideas for kind of creating accountability structures for my music. Like a couple friends of mine in Berlin, we were talking one evening, and I was talking about like how, man, I wish there was some way that I could like failure proof making good music. And they had the idea like, oh, what if we suggest a punishment that you have to endure if you don't create a song every week or something? So we ended up trying that, and that worked quite well for a time. The punishments were just ridiculous. I think the first one was I needed to send them an original song that fits certain semi-objective criteria for quality.
Can only imagine.
I would need to hit certain. Yeah, I would need to send them a song like by a certain day and a certain time, or else I would have had to. The first one is I would have had to shave off my eyebrows and then paint one of them on, just one of them, and then walk around like that for weeks. We did all sorts of silly things like that. And it worked for a while. I think after some period of time, it was more me kind of like hounding my friends to hold me accountable, which I don't think that really works. So we stopped doing that. But yeah, with this project, it made me think about how for future projects, like, maybe I should dedicate everything I do to someone or something, since that really is just a helpful tool.
Yeah, right. Because I'm dedicating this thing to you, but then I never finished it,
or it sucks.
Right. Yeah, that's not a bad approach actually. And there's the whole like loss aversion thing we have where we'd rather we feel more pain losing $100 than we feel joy like gaining $100.
Right.
So I heard of a website. I don't know if it still exists. It's a while back, but you could set it up where if you don't complete whatever it is you're going to do, it will make a donation to like some cause you hate. Something terrible.
Yeah.
So you pick something like you do not want to ever support, and if you don't do whatever it is you got to do, they get the money, and you're just like, no.
Right.
Can't
yeah, I've heard of that, and I used that, come to think of it, maybe like 5 years ago. And a really cool idea. I think the reason I didn't stick with it was I think you have to invite, like, you can self-report whether you did the thing or not, or you invite friends to be sort of your auditors to make sure that you did the thing or not, which it's like, ultimately it still comes down to finding those people who are going to like really hold you accountable and who you can trust to do that. And because I think like if it was my decision to decide whether I had passed or failed, like, and it's like, well, I really don't want this money to go to, I don't know, the Heritage Foundation or whatever it is, then yeah, it's a bit tricky. But yeah, I forgot about that, but that's I wonder if they've changed it.
It's a funny thing to think about.
Maybe I'll take another look.
Nah, yeah, I did it. I just yeah. Good guess.
Right.
So the record, the album is coming out in a little bit of time still, right?
Yeah.
You said in January, am I not mistaken?
Yeah, Friday, January 13th. It's our lucky day.
And any reason for Friday the 13th?
Yeah. So
I think a lot of people would be like, "Oh, we can't do it that day." But
right. Yeah, I was thinking about it, but then I was thinking, oh, actually, Friday the 13th is kind of our lucky day for the project, sort of. So I mentioned we got the grant in November or fall 2020. But like these were grants we had applied for months before, and just got a lot of rejections. And then one blustery autumn day in Berlin, Friday the 13th, I get this ominous looking letter in the mail, which looks very official looking. It definitely looks like a parking ticket. Like I was convinced it was some kind of parking ticket, even though I did not own a car. But open it up and turns out it was grant to make Single Sonic 7 happen. So we figured it would be a good day to that it started. Single Sonic 7 started on Friday the 13th, and it will be released on Friday the 13th. There is, cool. However, there's an addendum to that story. Where on that same day when we got the grant, I was just jumping for joy, and invited a couple friends over to celebrate by going to this lake across the street from where I was living in Berlin and taking out this little inflatable raft that I had and going for a paddle on the lake. And it was this...
There's like cool. Literally a movie called Friday the 13th.
Yeah.
With the lake.
Okay, well.
There's a few of them.
I'll bet. Naive as we were, we thought it would be a good idea. What could possibly go wrong? Yeah, so we took the raft to this lake. It was a very dark night, and we brought some snacks, a bottle of wine. We thought, oh, this is going to be great. We're like maybe 4 feet from the coast. Like we had literally just pushed off from the coast. And then we hear this and the raft had caught on some kind of submerged, like jagged branch or something, and torn this enormous gash in the underside of the raft, which immediately starts just sinking, and we're panicking and screaming, oh my god, we're gonna drown, and flailing around. And one of my friends jumps off of the raft to the coast, like to the shore, which he makes it, but that pushes the other two of us in the raft further into the lake, so we're just flailing around. I'm pretty sure someone gets whacked with a paddle, and we eventually make it back.
That's pretty much the plot of the movie, I think, right there.
Right? Okay, yeah. Yeah. And so anyway, that's I guess how Single Sonic 7 was born, with a lot of flailing and screaming.
Yin and yang, right?
Right. Yeah. I'm not quite sure what that says for the ultimate fate of this project, but yeah, cool. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, I know that feeling. I was on a inflatable paddleboard this summer, and I was paddling. I keep hearing like pff, pff, every time it would like get just above the water.
Right.
Sure enough, I'm like, oh no, I think I hit like barnacles on the side of a dock or something.
Was it Friday the 13th?
I don't think so. Could have been.
Yeah.
But that's cool. I like that though. That's the kind of like full circle thing, and there's a lot of that full circleness happening with this album, and this like kind of all collecting things from all over the globe. And the music is cool, and it's fun. It's
nice.
You know, I hear like unifying elements to the music, but then there's also, which I'm assuming is like some of your work. I'm like hear a lot of like bass grooves and things, because I think I'm assuming that's a lot of your influence. But what's really cool is like hearing how all the other stuff comes together with it too, and it takes it. Each song is kind of like at one time it's like its own little world, but it still has like the unity of an album.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad you think so. And there's, as you can tell, there's no genre. There are some defining elements, but it's quite genre fluid. And what turned out as the album, it's basically the cream of the crop of a lot of stuff composed over the last several years. Some of it was just trash, some of it was okay, but we definitely did not really make an attempt to kind of focus it into a single genre. And I guess that wasn't even really an aspiration of the project. It wasn't, genre definitely wasn't something we were thinking too hard about, just because I think kind of at least the philosophical pretext for that is just that, like, okay, we're this big diverse world, we have a big diverse message, and so yeah, we don't really care about making sure that it adheres to certain like stylistic guidelines. So I think folks listening to this, if you're interested in checking out some new music, check this out when it comes out, since every song is wildly different from every other song on the album. So yeah, my hope is that there's something on there that for everyone to find something they like.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. And I have the link to the website, right? It's singlesonic7.org.
Yes.
Where you get kind of like the mission statement and what you guys are trying to do. Some links so you can see who's involved, and also connect on the social media stuff. So, get ready. Are you going to release songs a little bit before the date? Is anything like that in store?
Yeah, we're gonna release at least one song as a single, date to be announced, and then cool. Yeah, the rest of it will just be on Friday, January 13th.
Very cool. Well, we'll definitely do another shout out around then too, so that
thank you.
Remind people. But hey, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk. It's really cool that you did this. I love this working together, collaborating, and kind of bringing the world together. As I said at the opening, I think if there's one good thing for us to all realize with, COVID, is that we're connected, and the interest of other people really does matter to us, and it affects us. So this is a nice musically symbolic representation of that, and it's also just a great undertaking, awesome
thanks for that. And I will add, it is largely symbolic, but also not entirely, because when you stream this album on Apple Music or Spotify or wherever, we are donating all revenue from this album to an organization called helpingtoleave.org, which it's a really cool organization that helps people in Ukraine escape from areas where combat is ongoing, including occupied areas and places where basically you would think that it would not be possible to get out of, or many people would think. And just to kind of close off the story about my friend, I am very happy to report that after several months, it did become clear that there would be certain kinds of tangible ways of helping out this friend, and we were able to work with this organization, Helping to Leave, which was able to provide my friend with basically accurate information, which was enough to help my friend escape to safety. And so we really like what they do. I really like what they do. It's a fantastic organization. And when you stream Single Sonic 7, all of the proceeds go to Helping to Leave. And I would also like to just insert a little additional plug for them. If you, the listener, happen to know people in Ukraine, especially people in Ukraine who are trying to get out, but they don't have a safe way of getting out, send them a link to Helping to Leave. A lot of people don't know that help is available, or that just that it's possible. It is surprising the situations in which they have been able to help. So I would highly recommend to people that they check out helpingtoleave.org.
Nice. We'll definitely put that in the show notes as well.
Great.
It's great. Thanks so much, Ethan. This is awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brian. This has been fun. Podcast listeners, please, follow, like, subscribe, listen to the damn album when it comes out. If you go to our website, which I'm sure you'll include a link, on the front page, you can enter your email, and we'll let you know when pre-save becomes available. And if you're listening to this after Friday the 13th in January, then you can just listen to it. End of plug.
Nice. Well, thank you, and thank you, the listener.
Thank you, Ryan.